Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Meliorvia. I'm up here today at Immortals Inc. with Mikey.
What is going on, John? What have you brought to us today?
Well, we recently talked about the Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest.
Yes.
And one of the things I mentioned was that the book did not include a sample adventure or a whole lot of monsters. And this book right here is all about fixing that problem.
Oh, really?
This is the first playtest published adventure that they've printed for Starfinder 2nd Edition. It's called A Cosmic Birthday. This is written by Jenny Jarzabski. My apologies if I mangled that. Jenny also did Mechageddon that we talked about fairly recently, and she did also work on the Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest rules. So presumably she knows those rules pretty well and is well suited for writing an adventure for it, right? And they call it an adventure. I'd call it a little more than that because I think it's more of a campaign. There are 3 chapters in here, each of which could easily be a standalone adventure that might run more than 4 to 6 hours. It's intended to take you for starting level characters at level 1 up through level 4 over the course of those 3 parts. And to me, this kind of feels like a setting-altering adventure because there's a lot of stuff going on. And, I mean, that kind of fits in with when you do a new edition of the game, you maybe want to advance the timeline a little bit and change things up a little bit so that the world isn't quite the same as it was for the first adventure. I do also think if folks haven't played Starfinder at all before, A Cosmic Birthday could be a really cool intro into the setting because it starts off at Absalom Station, which is kind of the get-to-know-you central town location for Starfinder. Before I get into any adventure spoilers, I do want to cover the back part of the book, which is the Alien Archive. I mentioned this does give you a few critters that are specific to Starfinder. First one is the Hard Light Scamp. This is kind of like a little batty gremlin-y type thing that is basically a hologram.
Yeah, it looked very interesting.
Yeah.
I've just seen.
And then there's the Hesper, which is a fae, right? So a fairy type creature, but it's one that's not attuned to things we usually think of as being natural. Instead, it's attuned to radiation.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then the next one is the Midwife. That's this scary looking octopusy globular tentacle aberration that's on the cover.
Great depiction of a midwife, for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely what you think of when you think of the birthing process. And then there's a space station gremlin in here. So the reason things break is because the gremlins are coming around and trashing them.
Yeah.
And then there's several NPCs who have big stories that are part of this adventure where you get a lot of their backstory and their personality, but they aren't statted out back in this section. Spoilers, as we dive into the 3 chapters of the book. If you're planning on playing, you might not want to listen past this part. The first chapter is into the ghost levels. So the ghost levels are basically a parallel reality that kind of mirrors parts of Absalom Station, where characters might be going down a hallway and suddenly they're somewhere else. They're in a different reality. Well, because of some of the world-changing events that are happening, the ghost levels come into more prominence within Absalom Station, and the characters basically end up in a dungeon crawl through these ghost levels. And I do think it's kind of cool. The adventure starts off with what I like to call a Simpsons intro. So you've watched The Simpsons, right, Mikey?
Yeah.
You know how at the start of every episode of The Simpsons, they kind of lean into a story and you think, oh, this is where the story's going to go. And then about 2 minutes later, things completely change direction.
Yeah.
That is exactly how this adventure is set up. The characters have a meeting with a guy who's hiring them to do a specific job. And then, our big cosmic event happens and they get shifted into the ghost levels. And so the entire adventure heads in this wildly different direction.
Nice.
Yeah. There's lots of hazards here. There's a few NPCs. There's a few monsters that are covered that aren't necessarily the ones that were back in that Alien Archive section. And it's all happening because the power from the Star Stone that makes Absalom Station function is flickering and altering reality. And the characters basically need to fight their way through this. I think this is actually a great intro to the game mechanics and a solid playtest of them because you are interacting with a lot of different monsters and a lot of different hazards. So it gives the players a solid opportunity to see how those function, in play. And by the end of this section, once they've fought their way through this essentially dungeon space station alternate reality thing, they're going to hit level 2. And then we hit the next chapter, and that one was about 15 pages. The next chapter is about 22, and it's called Big Trouble in Little Akaton. Little Akaton is kind of this neighborhood that's not desperately poor, but let's say folks there are struggling.
Okay.
And because of that, they kind of have a community where people get along together and support one another. And you've got a lot of different, iconic locations within there. There's a bodega, there's a community center, a scrapyard, a diner, a block of tenement housing, and a shipyards because space station, right? And the folks that are here have come from the planet Akaton for the most part and are interacting with and building their own community here. They're closely knit and they all get along, but with these problems with the soulstone power and the ghost levels popping up, Little Akaton's in danger. And so the guy that they talked to during that Simpsons intro to the first adventure talks to them again here and hires them to help somebody out in Little Akaton. Tells them to go to the scrapyard. And that might lead to a bank heist.
Of course.
Because Little Akaton needs some money. The bank's got money that they don't know what to do with. And the player characters just want to make those necessary connections.
Of course.
Right? There's a lot of other small jobs that can happen here, ranging from cleanup to service to, just watching out for some of these folks in the community. It's really a well put together sandbox, and it lets you play test the game system again, but coming very much from the role-playing perspective instead of the strictly tricks and traps and combat kind of thing. There is a nice range of monsters presented too, and this section wraps up when the characters either earn enough XP to hit level 3 or just kind of run out of stuff to do and the game master wants to move things along. And that leads into chapter 3, which is Happy Birthday! Because we are celebrating the birth of the newborn, which is one of the new deities that's presented in the Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest. And it's this deity's birth that's ultimately causing all of these problems with reality because things are shifting around, and he sent out all of his midwives, those nursemaids that are supposed to be caring for him, and the doulas that are seeing to his birth to try and provide him with the energy he needs to finish being born. And one of those midwives found the Starstone, and they're taking power away from it. Well, the way they're taking power away from it is actually endangering all of Absalon Station and Little Akaton in particular, because there's a power substation that's massively overheating. And if it finishes overheating, it's going to blow up and take out a big chunk of Absalon Station, including all these friends that the player characters made in Little Akaton in the last chunk of the adventure.
Great.
Yep. So there's these new ghost levels appearing, and they basically need to fight through this misplaced city that kind of manifested through the ghost levels right where that substation's supposed to be. Some fun encounters here. There's undead, there's fungus, there's fae. It's a mishmash of different stuff.
It's a monster mash.
It really is. And then the power station itself is contained within a living cocoon that's guarded by swarm insects. There's a big battle at the end against the aberration that's the cover child here for that midwife. And then after that, we get a few pages of history of the newborn and its religion. Nice thing about this is it is a ready-to-go adventure. You've got all of your monsters, so this is a solid way to immediately get off the bat, playtesting 2nd edition. 62 pages of adventure, paperback, softcover, available for $25. We got this on the shelf here at Immortals Inc. or immortalsinc.com. Player characters aren't in here, but 1st edition sample characters are available from download from Paizo's site that you can just print out. They even come with backstories and artwork because they're the iconic characters for the playtest.
Yeah.
So all that's ready to go. Easy way to intro and try out Starfinder 2nd edition, especially if you've already got the Pathfinder 2nd edition books on hand. this is something that's up your alley, stop in and check it out.
Well said, John. What a cosmic kerfluffle that is. Well, thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.
Till next time, folks. Good gaming.